Hello, angels. Welcome back. Music Corner. Host for this evening of yapping. My name is Lavender, as always, and it is good to be back, sitting in this chair, making a YouTube video. Like, I make shorts all the time, but, this is a whole YouTube video. Speaking of which, let's open up with a thank you to everyone that watched and shared their supportive comments for my Halsey and Latigre video essay that came out earlier this year. I've taken a little bit of a quality over quantity approach to running this channel this year, more so than I have in the past, and it kind of seems to be paying off, and I'm looking forward to hopefully putting out some more thoughtful videos, or continuing to, at least in the future. But with that being said, we are continuing a long-running trend on this channel that is a little bit more in the listicle format that I once made my entire brand, and we are doing so because, shockingly, we are already approaching the halfway point of 2025, and musically speaking, I think it's been pretty good. I should add a caveat there. The hits and the big songs this year from a pop music chart watching standpoint have been garbage. Oh my god. Stay tuned for that video about what the fuck is wrong with the Hot 100 right now. But underneath all of that, in the musical and critical underground, there's been so much exciting material. I will say it's probably not the best year that I've ever covered in terms of the first half quantitatively. I think there are just barely 20 albums and some honorable mentions that I thought were worth shouting out in this video. However, the high end of this list is spectacular. So you're definitely going to hear me overly gushing about some of these albums. But you know what? I always do that, and you guys have been watching so far. So thanks for that. Please continue. I'm recording this during the great heat wave, so you'll forgive my constant water drinking. Speaking of, I'm recording this on Wednesday, the 25th of June, so I have not heard the Lorde album yet, and therefore it is not eligible for this list, even though it may very well be among the best albums of the first half of the year. I don't know, there's a timeline to this shit. With that being said, I do want to go ahead and get 5 honorable mentions out of the way real quick. The last 5 cuts I made before finalizing the list on this video in no particular order. We have the new Little Sims album, Lotus, which I just reviewed and I think is quite solid. We have the new Preoccupations record, Ill at Ease. I think is a big bounce back from Preoccupations and a return to a style that a lot of fans have been clamoring for. Additionally, we have the new Jennifer record, Jennifer ? Which I liked quite a bit, one of my favorite debuts of the year, and a great introduction to this band. Additionally, and this was probably the hardest cut of the bunch, we have the sophomore record from Caroline, a band I highlighted a few years ago when I enjoyed their debut album. This one is even better, Caroline 2, like it quite a bit, highly recommended. It was very hard to cut it from this list. And finally, it will not be the last self-plug of this video, but definitely check out the Sorsha Dream self-titled record, one of my favorite hyperpop releases of the year. She invented a new genre called Wizard Sleaze, and I know that because I got to interview Catherine from Sorsha Dream earlier this year in Ringtone Magazine. Self-plug. If you like the record and want to check it out, give it a read. I'll put the link down there. And that is that. 5 honorable mentions. Out of the way real quick, we have 20 albums to talk about. I did not rank them because I'm going to do that at the end of the year in an albums of the year video. However, I did just throw them in alphabetical order so that there's some kind of organization to this chaos. Which means that first up on the list is friend of the show, Backwash. If you have been paying attention to this channel for a few years, you are no doubt familiar with Backwash, the thunderously intense rapper who has been combining metal and industrial music with her sound across a highly acclaimed trilogy of records that dropped earlier this decade, culminating in the excellent 2022 record, His Happiness Shall Come First, Even Though We're Suffering. It's been a few years since that record came out, and now Backwash is back with a new record, Only Dust Remains, and one that substitutes some of the noisy, brash intensity and rawness of the instrumentation for something that is occasionally a little bit more subtle. And don't get me wrong, she is still capable of absolutely commanding your attention with her throttling vocals and really intense instrumentation, but she's also dialing it back a little bit on a few of these songs and showing off her abilities as a storyteller in a more subtly emotive way than she was able to when screaming her brains off on most of the tracks from her great trilogy. And that creates some really striking moments, as you'd expect from a song with a title like History of Violence. For example, there is some highly political themes going on this record, and she is exploring them in a detail that is both gripping and uncompromising, occasionally brutal as a result, but deeply, deeply honest. And what results is an extremely powerful listen and one of the best rap records that I've heard this year. One of just, I think, 3 that I'm going to talk about in this video. So hip-hop fans, don't miss out on this one. And if you're just going to listen to one song to try and check out the vibe, definitely make it the long, intense lead single, Wake Up. Next up on the list, with one of the first albums to drop this year that I really, really loved, that being the new Bad Bunny record, DTMF. Bad Bunny has released quite a lot of material that I really, really enjoyed over the last couple of years. But, and I'm far from the only critic to ever express this, but his approach to albums can be a little bit bloated, and as a result, there are occasional times in his discography where I wish less could have been more, and frankly, honestly, I think that's kind of the case again on this record. But despite a song or two that I'm not crazy about, some of my favorite Bad Bunny songs ever pop up on this track list, and it is impressively consistent. Honestly, the lowlights are pretty few and far between, but what is even more impressive about this album is perhaps its versatility, and that's always been a strength of Bad Bunny's. Some of the hardest fucking summer playlist goddamn jams that have come out this year are on this record, but there are also a ton of interesting, fun, and playful experiences on a song like Cafe Con Ron, or tracks where Bad Bunny is getting into his feelings a little bit more, expressing his loneliness, a very Drake style of alone in the club, kind of suffering from success-ass poise, but I don't know, one that Bad Bunny clearly feels authentically about and has a lot to say about as a result. And so in a year where several big mainstream albums from artists like Lady Gaga, Drake and P&D, Playboi Carti, The Weeknd have hit me as okay, good but not great, I really do think this Bad Bunny record is fantastic. I am not surprised to see that it has been extremely acclaimed and has really stuck with people on both the charts and in several critical lists. It's really good, and if you've been dragging your feet on Bad Bunny, you are beyond out of excuses. And check out the opener to this record, Nuevo, for an example of how fucking good he can be. At number 3, one of the darkest and most harrowing albums that I have heard this year. That being the new Billy Woods effort, a rapper who I have always enjoyed, maybe not as much as some other critics, though I was a pretty big fan of the last Arm & Hammer album, We Buy Diabetic Test Strips, and I also really enjoy Billy Woods' crossover with More Mother, their 2020 record. This may be my favorite thing that Billy Woods as a solo artist has ever done. And that's really because of how gripping and harrowing his storytelling is across this record, which is so funny because I was really entranced by the lead single to this thing, Misery, which actually saw him in his own sort of mature and reserved stylings being kind of horny with it, and I was wondering if this would be a lighter effort from Billy Woods than we were used to. Wrong. This thing is paralyzingly dark at points, and it has experimental gripping percussion and instrumentation to match that dejected and, I'll say it again, harrowing energy. Harrowing really is the way to describe this album, as Billy Woods is digging into the details of his personal life and of societal trials and tribulations that deeply trouble him and portraying them in a way that is just a lot to handle. So if you're in the state of mind to process a record like this, I highly, highly recommend it. And one of the best places to start is one of the most striking musical moments I have heard anywhere in 2025, the insanely dark but incredible song Waterproof Mascara.
You kept the passports in. The king's dead and your uncles are not our friends.
Next up, and I'm kind of surprised to be saying this, I gotta give it up to Black Country New Road with Forever How Long. Obviously, I think that this is one of the best bands of the decade so far. I loved their first two albums, especially their sophomore record, Ants From Up There, which might be my favorite album of the entire decade. But with the loss of frontman Isaac Wood from the band and a pretty drastic shift in sound and style, I really didn't know what to expect going into this album, and while it definitely shifts its focus to a more twee direction, the extremely talented songwriters and instrumentalists who propelled Black Country New Road to fame in the first place are still shining on this album. These songs still have this rambling compositional style that I find extremely gripping and refreshing as you listen through this record, and some of the storytelling is just as remarkable as it's ever been. Just because this album has lost some of its post-punk angst in favor for a more shimmering and twee style of vocals from a trio of female vocalists does not mean that it is not as gripping a narrative experience as the records that preceded it, though it is less personal sometimes, in a sense, less vulnerable. That kind of allows them to stretch their wings thematically and touch on subjects that it doesn't really seem like either of the first two Black Country New Road records would have been able to. Not to mention all of the great and playful instrumentation that has always defined their music obviously persists onto this record. It's a really solid listen, and I would not let any haters of this album tell you otherwise. If you like the first two Black Country New Road records, it's at least worth checking out, and if you didn't like those, I don't know, maybe this will be more your style. But if you did like those first two records, then I absolutely have to recommend you the song Nancy Tries to Take the Night, because it is incredible and could have slotted really well into either of those albums, in my opinion. Next up, one of the most predictable entries on the list, and that is the new Bon Iver record, Fable, an album I really had a feeling I was going to like. I was a big fan of the EP that preceded it, that dropped last year, and I loved all of the singles that were released this year, particularly Walk Home and Everything is Peaceful Love, so we had heard most of the album before it dropped, and yeah, it's great. I think it is a really interesting middle point between the first two Bon Iver records with their very chilling, icy, folkish stylings, and the second two Bon Iver records, which turn to a different kind of chilling that is a little bit more grating and electronic. But on this record, I think they try to do something that was attempted but not perfectly executed on the last Bon Iver record. That being, get brighter, get happier. There is a genuine exuberance to several of these songs. I'll point out again the track Everything is Peaceful, which I think is just fantastic, and it is gentle, and it is breezy, and it is delightful in a way that I can't really ever say there are a ton of Bon Iver songs that I would describe in that way before. I don't know, something about Justin Vernon singing in the same voice that has been used to tell so much isolating, painful poetry, but now he's talking about climbing up a tree. I think it's great. Give the record a shot. Next up on the list, I know it's just about the most cliched thing in the entire world for a music critic to have one metal album on their list and for it to be Deaf Heaven. I know, but I really, really like this new Deaf Heaven record. After once stoking controversy amongst black metal purists by fusing the genre with shoegaze and post-rock, the previous Deaf Heaven album, 2021's Infinite Granite, was a full indulgence into that non-metal style of their sound, and it wasn't great. It was okay, probably my least favorite Deafheaven record yet. So seeing them quite thunderously and righteously return to the world of black metal was really exciting for me, but they have not left those instincts behind. If anything, in the decade plus since Sunbather, they have grown both their ambitions and their intuitive feel for genres like shoegaze and post-rock, and found even better, more interesting ways to interpolate them into these ripping fucking black metal songs. The longer compositions on this record, whether they are dusted with spoken word intros or genuinely infectious repeated refrains, they're unlike most black metal that you're going to hear this year, and frankly, I think that's a good thing for Deafheaven. I think the fact that they're stretching their legs in this way makes this a really, really interesting record at a really interesting point in their career, and it's one that I can highly, highly recommend. So if you're willing to shoot for the fences and swing on a black metal record, even if you're not a typical metal fan, or if you're a huge metal fan and want to try something that is maybe a little bit closer to conventional rock music, just a step, still fucking black metal, listen to the song Winona, because it's everyone's favorite, mine included. It's incredible. Next up, another absolute no-brainer. FK Twigs Youexual, an album that, if you'll remember, just a year ago, a lot of people were musing on the fact that it may never come out. It has been 6 years since Twigs' last proper studio album, though she did drop the Capri Songs mixtape, which a lot of people liked. I'm not crazy about it. I was happy to see her return to the studio album format, and Youexual is a record that is absolutely worthy of the lineage of LP1 and Magdalene. Twigs is bjorking it the fuck up all over this record, and yet it is just lathered with her own sensuality. There are a ton of just fucking hot girl jams on this record, and obviously there are sort of cellophane style tracks, the title track Youexual sticking out to me in particular, that are just immaculately beautiful. The fact that she can tightrope walk these two styles and do them both so well and so consistently and weave together a fantastic track list is just remarkable. I feel like this was probably one of the most highly anticipated albums of the year for a lot of people, and I don't see how it didn't live up to every single bit of hype. I love this goddamn record. And if you want to listen to my favorite deep cut on this record and a track that has stuck with me pretty much all year, please check out Twigs bjorking at her absolute most bjorkiest on Room of Fools. This Room of Fools. Next up on the list, probably the gentlest of these 20 records, that being, unsurprisingly, the new Icho Aoba album, Luminescent Creatures. Japanese folk singer Icho Aoba, with the long-awaited follow-up to her sort of commercial breakthrough, Windswept Aiden. That record and much of her back catalog has become extremely adored by many sort of online music fans, and so among a subset of music listeners, the type of people to check out a Japanese folk album recommendation, this was also one of the most anticipated albums of the year. And while it didn't quite floor me in the same way, it features all of the same elements deployed in the same way: her subtle, gentle, beautiful vocals, her touching instrumentation, the naturalistic poetry, lyrics, and songwriting that I have come to both expect and love from Ichiko's music, all exists right here on this record. And even in a narrower and more focused formula, I think she allows herself to flex all of her talents and abilities in a way that is just mystical and entrancing, and occasionally even fantastical, despite how touching, gentle, and intimate this record can be in terms of the sound of its recording. And if you want to see all of what I just said condensed down into one song, check out the single Luciferine. Next up on the list, Jane Remover, Revengeseekerz. If you want to read my full thoughts on this record, I did review it again for Ringtone Magazine. If you want to check that out right here. I mean, I reviewed all of these albums, but this one, it's in a fucking magazine, so I went hard on it. But I can pretty much condense all of that down into this push and pull between Jane's artistic immaturity as a lyricist and as someone who is clearly not ready for the level of fame that they have been elevated to, versus the fact that they're a fucking instrumental prodigy. The production on this record and the beats and the mixes go crazy, so even though listening to Jane act jaded and frankly a little bit entitled at their own fan base, as toxic and annoying as Jane Remover fans can be, this record still sounds great. It erupts out of the mixes. And so on tracks where Jane is more focused on sounding like a gorgeous goddess of the dance floor, they're essentially unmatched. And if you want to hear that in its absolute best format, check out one of my favorite songs of the year, Angels in Camo. Next up on the list, time for another friend of the show, Jasmine Forte, with her amazing new album, You're the Morning. She was delightful enough to sign this copy for me. Where should I put this? That'll do. Jasmine Forte, singer, songwriter, emotional and intimate talent, signed with Phoebe Bridgers' Satisfactory record label and released her amazing debut. This is a singer-songwriter record. It occasionally, believe it or not, dabbles in sapphic themes, but does so with a subtle touch and a gentle vocal demeanor that I find completely entrancing. I absolutely adored all of the singles released in the lead up to this record, in particular the absolute masterpiece, Elephant, and the album was everything that I hoped it would be. The beauty in Jasmine's raw vocals is striking and omnipresent on this record, and it is why I find some of the most intimate, gentle, and sad moments to be the most emotionally and compositionally dynamic and extremely compelling. So yeah, if you love the boy genius camp of sapphic singer-songwriting, this is a must listen, because frankly, in my opinion, I kind of think it's better than any of the trio have done ever. And if you're furious about that hot take and want to follow up on it, check out one of the more underappreciated songs from this record, the track New Shoes. It's a huge personal favorite.
I was the shoes and the soles of your feet.
And speaking of intimate, personal, and vulnerable records, Jason Isbel, with a new album that is stripped down to its absolute very barest, just Jason and his acoustic guitar, and there is a good reason for that. He is getting vulnerable as fuck all over this record and talking about his divorce. One of two divorce albums we're going to talk about on this list, and one that is way more willing to dig into some of the grittier details. Jason is letting himself have it at some of the more vulnerable and authentic points on this record, and the really stripped down and simple instrumental presentation that he chooses to deploy is kind of perfect for a lot of the themes he explores. There's just a touch and a finesse to making music like this that I find extremely entrancing, and Jason has it. He is as great a songwriter as ever, and if you have ever enjoyed any of the Jason Isbell records for that songwriting prowess, it is present and presented in a more direct way on this album than it has been in a long time. So, comes highly recommended from me. I guess this technically still qualifies as country, even though it's a lot closer to folk, but if you wanted a country recommendation, this is the best you're going to get so far this year. And for proof of that, check out the song Gravel Weed.
Now it's a gravel weed and I needed you to raise me.
Continuing as we fly through these, Jenny Haval with her new album, Iris Silver Mist. Another experiment, believe it or not, from one of the most interesting, groundbreaking, and experimental / conceptual singer-songwriters out there. Jenny Haval's ambitions have never slowed down, nor do they on this new record, which is smell-themed. Yes, literally, this album dabbles in a sort of nostalgia-driven smell experience. The sense that Jenny is recalling in her mind is what is conjuring a lot of the songwriting material on this record, and it's fascinating. she's hardly the first person to ever evoke smell as a tool for nostalgia, but building the record around it creates some really interesting songwriting quirks and album-long themes that she can explore in a lot more detail, and the results are great. Like a lot of Jenny Haval records, this thing is surprisingly versatile within the tight realm of singer-songwriter music. Some of the tracks here that hit harder in a way that feels like Jenny dialing the clock back a decade are just as enjoyable as her at her most gentle and beautiful and vulnerable. Personally, I have to slide a recommendation to this thing's excellent lead single, To Be a Rose.
Every cigarette my mother ever smoked.
Oh my god, the last addition to this list, one that I had to get out before recording this list because I really had a feeling it was going to be great. The new McKinley Dixon record, Magic Alive. Another self-plug here, but at the end of 2023, I interviewed McKinley Dixon about his great record, Beloved Paradise Jazz, and he sounded like someone who was not done yet. So I was really, really looking forward to what he was about to get into, especially after I started to hear some of the singles from this record, where he is playing with vibrant jazz instrumentation on his beats and the same kind of entrancing lyrical storytelling that he's been known for throughout his entire career. And yeah, on what is his best record yet, essentially everything is elevated. His talents, his collaborators, everything that he does, all of the ambitions he's always had as a really impressive, technically impressive rapper, as a really vivid and vulnerable and emotional storyteller, and as an artist who's willing to indulge with the experimental side of jazz right in its fucking face. It's all here. It is fantastic. It is excellent. And for reasons that I don't even have the time to get into right now, I think the masterpiece on this record is the song Could Have Been Different, which features Blue in already feature of the year. Draw a line under everything else.
Window and yeah, my name from afar with a face made of sunshine, first child of the bloodline.
Next up, oh my god. Model Actress. Pirouette. This shit may be the album of the fucking year. I mean, a few years ago, Model Actress erupted onto the scene with Dog's Body, their debut, bringing this really brash, bold, experimental, industrial music with a queerness and, frankly, a horniness, the likes of which has not been heard since fucking Nine Inch Nails. And I know the Nine Inch Nails comparison is a little bit overdone, but there just aren't that many other artists who do both industrial and horny this well. And while I would say this follow-up, Pirouette, is a little bit less horny than Dog's Body, it's still there. But in between those hornier moments, the band just continues to push their instrumental sound to crazier and crazier places and continues to indulge on these really fascinating sort of lyrical diatribes on singles like Diva or Cinderella. And then on the other side of things, you have these just throttling songs like Vespers and Doves. It is just an absolute fucking riot from start to finish. I've seen a little bit of skepticism directed at this album from people who were expecting it to sound a little bit more like Dog's Body than it does, but frankly, a band with so much instrumental excellence and experimental ambition, I don't think you can expect them to do the same thing over again. And what they do on Pirouette is every bit as intoxicating. For me, honestly, I think it's even more so. And for a fucking insane example, check out the song Poppies, another one of what might be the best tracks of the year. Divorce album number 2 on the list comes to us from Panda Bear, Sinister Grift. Obviously, Panda Bear is amazing. You can't see it, but I have a person pitch poster up in this room on the other side. I love Animal Collective. I've dished out a ton of praise to them in this decade so far. But even given all of that, I was surprised by just how good this record was, you know? Single after single dropped, and it has this warbling, watery, psychedelic indulgence that I'm kind of familiar with from Panda Bear at this point, though it is still intoxicating in a way that absolutely works on me, don't get me wrong. But yeah, hearing this album in full, there are just really no misses. It's so good and so interesting given the context of Noah's real life divorce that informs a lot of this material. It just made it even more interesting to listen to. I think this is a fantastic record, and if you were like me, kind of rolling your eyes at the idea that Panda Bear could have dropped one of the best albums of the year, despite his amazing stature and everything that he's accomplished, grow up, because this shit is fire. For proof, check out the song Anywhere But Here that I find genuinely fucking mesmerizing. Voices inside my mind. In the most batshit fucking insane moment of the year, we have the new record from Sheerling, the offshoot, spin-off, revitalized, reimagined version of Sprain, who hit with a great album Lamb as Effigy a few years ago. They are back, sort of reincarnated as Sheerling, though the lineup is obviously not exactly the same. And where the fuck to even begin? This is one long song, start to finish, with distinctive parts, brash, explosive instrumentation throughout. It is post-punk, though it can be so extreme and grating at points that I feel like that absolutely doesn't cover it. It dabbles in some more rustic instrumentation. It dabbles in what could be dark wave or even no wave in a sort of Swans-esque at moments throughout this one long song, and not to mention the lyrical content, which is extremely vulnerable, extremely thematic, and surprisingly tied together in a through line throughout this entire record, and also fucking insane. If this album cover isn't enough to convince you that this is one of the most insane fucking albums to come out this year, I don't know what is. So if more than anything else, you really want to be challenged, uppercase C challenged, give this Sheerling album a shot. I think it's pretty rewarding, though if my TikTok comments are anything to go by, not everyone feels the same. For post-punk in a more conventional sense, check out the next two records I'm going to talk about, which happen to just be back-to-back in the alphabet, that being Squid and Viagra Boys. Two bands who I think really broke through at the start of this decade, even though they had been working a little bit earlier than that. I really started to fall in love with both of them at the start of this decade when we were getting a rush of great new post-punk out of various places in Europe. And that is, again, the case here. I think Squid are bouncing back from a little bit of an awkward sophomore record, returning to some of the more punk and hardcore punk style ambitions that made them stand out amongst the pack on their excellent debut. And boy, Viagra Boys have never needed help standing out, and they're indulging further than ever into the deeply bizarre and strange ambitions of their songwriting, of their performance style, of their weird warbling vocals. This is just this insanely bizarre record. So yeah, if you love post-punk, check out both of these. Very different approaches to post-punk, but very much falling under the conventional post-punk lens, brash and bold records. And as examples of that, they both had great lead singles, with the Squid song Crispy Skin and the Viagra Boys song Man Made of Meat.
Pages of crispy skin.
I've subscribed to your mom's OnlyFans.
Only two more records to go, and the first one comes from third and final friend of the show, Weather Day, with the long-awaited masterpiece sophomore record, Hornet Disaster. Oh my god, this record's so good. I knew it was going to be good because pretty much all of the singles were just flat out amazing, most notably Angel and Tiara, and it includes several songs from the last 5 years of Weather Day that I already really, really enjoyed, but given just how long we've been waiting for this follow-up since Come In. I don't really mind the bulk of the material and how far Sputnik is reaching back for some of these tracks. It really does feel like you're listening to the Weather Day project develop and grow in real time, out of a debut that was recorded on an iPhone into a record that has much more instrumentation to offer, much more ambition in a lot of its poise and presentation, and yet it manages to sound so urgent and so raw in the exact same way that Come In did. While we're dabbling in internet core music, it's actually something that's always reminded me of Paranol, whose breakthrough project sounded so insanely brash and raw and uncompromising, and the records since then haven't been able to quite recreate that abrasive, garish urgency. But Weather Day absolutely does on this follow-up. This album, despite its increase in quality of recording and presentation, still kind of sounds like Sputnik screaming their brains out in a bedroom about their own grounded angst and sadness. As much as this record can be nebulous at points, it is also exceedingly grounded. Several moments really returned me to some of the sort of vivid evoking of nostalgia that Sputnik has always been so well known for, but also just really interesting metaphors in a way to make things that are so plain feel so lively. Songs on this album that are just about, I don't know, a blanket are so entrancingly fascinating and interesting, and it's a testament to both Weather Day's songwriting, but also the explosive, insane instrumentals that are attached to it. At some point, that turned from like coherent critique to like complete nonsense. I know this record is a little long for some people, but frankly, I think it is worth every moment. It is another one of my favorite albums of the year, and it made every bit of the waiting for a true sophomore Weather Day album completely worth it, as did seeing Sputnik perform it live and finally getting to meet them, because what a blast of a night that turned out to be. And I can't believe I'm saying this because there's so many songs on this record that are worth hearing, but much like Come In, it is the under 2-minute title track that the record begins with that I really think steals the show. Check out the song Hornet Disaster, and by the time it wraps, you should already be hooked on this thing. And last but certainly not least, sticking in the weather realm, we've got the new record from The Weather Station, who broke through back in 2021 with a record that I thought was decent, and then followed it up with a much gentler, icier, stripped down and reserved follow-up that I honestly enjoyed a lot more, and it was because of the songwriting, which is why I thought that she could translate back into the full brush of instrumentation that she had been experimenting with on her breakthrough, with improved songwriting in tow, and make a great record doing it. And frankly, that's exactly what happened. Much like the Bon Iver record, I went into this kind of assuming it was going to be good based on the singles, which I still think are fantastic, but the deep cuts are honestly great. There's a wonderful spoken word cut on this record that reminds me of someone like Cassandra Jenkins, and there are several upbeat and urgent songs on this record that are genuinely so catchy in a way that kind of reminds me of the way that people described her breakthrough album. It just didn't feel that way to me. So yeah, as far as the Weather Station goes, this kind of feels like getting the best of both worlds, and I think that's really cool. Again, if you're a fan of indie folk and singer-songwriter kind of music and want to indulge with this a little bit, definitely recommend checking out the song Neon Signs. It shows not just why her putting a little bit of energy behind her songs can be great, but also why her songwriting and vocals are so dynamic and fit so well within this style.
Every neon sign, every flashing light.
And that's that. 20 records that I love. Real quick, before we go, I do want to recommend to you some music from some friends of mine, some personal friends of mine, starting with the new Based Girl album. Friend of the show, I mean, you know, friend of mine in real life, Eve, here with her debut, sort of dabbling in a really interesting sort of electronic atmosphere of kind of a combination of influences. There's some early James Blake and some of the dancier, glitchier beats on this record, but also a huge sort of Young Lean influence going on in Blade and the like. It's a really interesting record, and one that surprised me given what her online persona is like. This thing is definitely more experimental than I think a lot of people were anticipating, but I think it's great. And speaking of great, the girl Roxy, friend of the show, with Brain Dead Dolls, which I think is dying as a band, but they died just in time to drop this new record that is an honest-to-God death rock album. Year of Our Lord 2025. I think I've talked on this channel before about how the genre of death rock, sort of Christian death-ass death rock, has never really received its same kind of revival. But yeah, I think that's what's going on here, and it's by a trans woman from California. What could be better than that? And finally, speaking of trans woman from California, shout out the music of friend of the show, Teary Eyes. Again, if you're listening to Weather Station or Jasmine Forte and want to indulge in something into singer-songwritery and kind of folksy, Icho Aoba as well, don't miss this one. And please take to the comments to tell me what your favorite album of the year was. Hopefully I will be back with something as dynamic and interesting as the video essays you all love soon. But for now, listen to all these songs, indulge in all these records, get around to all of them, and do it before the end of the year. That's it for me. Mwah.